I spent the middle of September in San Francisco, where California Governor Jerry Brown was hosting the Global Climate Action Summit. It was huge. Alec Baldwin was there, and Al Gore, and Harrison Ford. And walking trees, too. People on stilts, draped in leaves. They were tall and willowy, towering over us. They were beautiful. That was the public face of the event, but tedious workshops took up most of the time, where experts focused on new ways of, say, helping indigenous people conserve their forests, or of farming sustainably, or of monitoring supply chains, the kind of important but sometimes wonky stuff that I tried to break down for you guys here on this show. So we had these high-profile but kind of fluffy events designed to get the word out, and then we had these experts who were talking about the same things they always talk about, real, viable solutions that could get us out of this mess, but that no one outside these halls was paying attention to. It was a little bit depressing. And then this happened.
I told some people I'm not going to another conference, I'm not going to another march, I'm not going to another rally. I won't even come to a summit unless I see some excitement among you, the co-warriors who are here today.
His name is Reverend Dr. Gerald Durley, and he lit up this wonky policy event like nothing I'd ever seen.
You are the warriors. You are the fighters. What good? If we've got a cause, if our cause is just, and I know that it is, we've got to go back to what made us strong during the Civil Rights Movement.
What does the Civil Rights Movement have to do with climate change? And who is this guy to preach about it to a room full of scientists and policy wonks? To answer the first question, climate change and civil rights are inexorably intertwined. And not just because the destruction of our living ecosystems robs us of our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but because they both require the same kind of coordinated action. To answer the second question, I'll reference Reverend Durley's 2014 autobiography, I Am Amazed, Reflections on an Awe-Inspiring Life, which I picked up after meeting him on this day. Born in Kansas and raised in California, he finished high school in Oregon and then marched with Martin Luther King Jr. while earning his first of many academic degrees, this one in psychology at Tennessee State University. While there, Bobby Kennedy noticed him and persuaded Durley to join the Peace Corp, which he did. That brought him to Nigeria, then to Switzerland, before he came home to the United States and became a central figure in Atlanta's civil rights scene.
What made us strong were two key words. One word was we were willing to sacrifice. The other was take a risk.
I knew nothing of Reverend Durley before this day, when he showed up to open a panel discussion on indigenous rights. But I knew that he electrified a room full of policy wonks, which is hard to do. And he did so because he wasn't just reiterating something we all knew, but reminding us of something we'd forgotten. Specifically, he reminded us that climate change isn't just about science or economics, the issues I usually try to address on this show, but about something deeper, more human.
This is a moral war that we're in today. Immoral decisions are being made. I don't need breaking news to tell me what's going on. I don't need another white paper, and I don't need scientists. I see and smell what's going on in the environment. And guess what? You in this room, we make the real news. When the news comes out, nobody can doubt us. We cannot ever again say that we're not winners. The Civil Rights Movement taught me one thing. I never thought, I'm 77 years old now, a great-grandfather, and I talk to my grandchildren, I say, this is your time. Join in. We cannot break down and build silos, black and white and gay and lesbian and red and blue. We're all on this planet together, and environmental climate change is an equal opportunity destroyer. To me, it is the civil rights issue of our time. And if our time is to have any kind of sustainability, it's got to come from those in this room. It can't be the person next to you. We've got to join forces, hold hands, look up. And I think about this now. The God that created this universe is still in charge. And if we can understand and connect to something that's in charge, guess what? We will win this war. Don't give up. Don't back up. Don't quit. Don't turn around. Know that this is get excited about something. Don't just say this is another conference, this is another summit. Every now and then you ought to want to stand up and say, we will not be defeated. We will not bow down. We will not back up. This is our moment. This is our time. Don't take it for granted. Don't take this for granted. We are winning. We are not losers. God bless you. Did I do it in 8 minutes?
Man may be unwittingly changing the world's climate through the waste products of his civilization.
There's a group of us now who are proposing that the Earth has actually entered a new epoch, and that is the Anthropocene.
We know that the enemy is carbon, and we know its ugly face. We should put a big fat price on it, and of course, add to that, drop the subsidies.
Earth, we broke it, we own it, and nothing is as it was. Not the trees, not the seas, not the forests, farms, or fields, and not the global economy that depends on all of these. But we can restore it, make it better, greener, more resilient, more sustainable. But how? Technology? Geoengineering? Are we doomed to live on a bionic planet, or is nature itself the answer? That's the question we address in every episode of Bionic Planet, a podcast of the Anthropocene, the new epoch defined by man's impact on Earth. And today we speak with the Reverend Dr. Gerald Durley about how we can tap the same forces that galvanized the civil rights movement to fix the climate mess. Today's show is a bit different from most in that we're not diving specifically into land use issues like forestry and sustainable farming, although Reverend Durley does touch on these. Instead, we're examining the ways that we can engage people emotionally to get us all working together on this, the greatest threat that our civilization has ever faced.
If the climate change, global warming, environmental justice movement is to have any level of sustainability, if it is to recruit new people, young people, and continue to keep people involved who are involved, it's got to take a different bent. It's got to be not just be in your head, but it's got to be in your heart. It's got to be in your gut. Too many people are scientifically solid, but they're emotionally dead. Dead people have never moved any movement. People must be excited. When I think about what God has done for all of us in terms of a perfectly balanced ecological world and how we've destroyed it, then I have to get excited. The word enthusiasm is from the Greek word entheos, meaning in God. And when God is blessing you, you've got to be strong and solid. But when I see people come and they give me all the statistics on fracking, all the statistics on carbon dioxide in the air, all the statistics on acidity in the ocean, and what the sharks and the whales are doing. But we've got to take that and translate it into the human dimension that we've got to protect each other so that we can protect the planet. But we're dull. And no, I don't want to get on any losing team where the coach tells me we're losing every game. But we come to conferences and marches and rally, and I hear all the statistics saying, well, 25,000 people died on that island, and the sun is scorching us, and we're at a critical point, and pretty soon I'm so down I can't believe that I can get up. We've got to inject this into this movement now that we're on the winning team. If you've got 3 people with some kind of excitement, we're winning. It doesn't take a great number of people to turn something around, just 1 or 2 who believe that can touch other people. They told me I could never vote in this country. And the man that told me I couldn't vote, he's dead, and I'm voting every day. So every now and then you've got to believe in your mission. We've got people that know all of the statistics, and they'll leave a conference, and they'll say, now, where are we going to meet next week? Let's meet in Brussels. Let's meet over there. And they discuss the same thing. It's good to
over
reinforce.
And over again, yeah.
It's good to reinforce information, but that information needs to be channeled into activism.
And how do we do that?
Well, I think the first thing you do, you got to believe in what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And then once you believe in what you're doing, 2 things kept us strong in the civil rights movement. 2 words. 1, we were willing to sacrifice and risk. See, if my mother got in my way, I'd have to walk over my mother in 1960 because the cause is greater than the individual. So consequently, when somebody says, I would like to get in the movement, and then I say, we're meeting next Thursday, and they tell me they've got an after business meeting, or they've got to go to a sorority meeting or go to a fraternity meeting, they're not ready. They're not willing to sacrifice that time. It's going to say, what am I willing to sacrifice? And then once you and I come together to sacrifice, we're like a brick. And when you get 3 bricks together, you got the beginning of a wall. And when you got a wall, you can start building your house. And you can determine, do you want it to be a house or a bridge? But it starts with individual commitment, willing to commit, sacrifice, and risk. And that starts with understanding the importance. Unfortunately, now we cannot reach the masses that everybody keeps talking about because we're not speaking that language. The Atlanta Housewives, which is a television show, is ahead of our scientific data right now because they're streaming right into where people are. That's what we've got to do. We have got to now go into people's gut.
You talked about believing you're on the winning team, and you marched with Martin Luther King.
Right.
You were on a team that was definitely the underdog for a long time, and you stuck with it. What lessons did you pull out of that?
I think the lessons that we learned, first of all, now, it was strange for me. I grew up in California. I was born in Wichita, Kansas, and I finished high school in Denver, Colorado. And when I finished high school, a coach said it was the 1960 Olympics. Wilma Rudolph, Cassius Clay at that time, they were all coming to Nashville. And I was there as a freshman looking at it. And I began to understand when I got from Colorado to Nashville, I was riding on the bus. And when we got to the Tennessee State line, the man pulled me and said, "You got to sit behind this line, nigga." And I said, "What?" And 2 elderly ladies said, "Don't cause any trouble, man. You'll get killed down here." So here I was, an all-city, all-state basketball player, being told by a bus driver to sit behind the line in Nashville, Tennessee. Certain things in your life that just prick you, but you don't know what, and it builds on it. And so consequently, when I got there, I met Andy Young and the different ones, and a march there in Nashville. And I said, "Wait a minute, what is this about?" And they started explaining. Me having grown up in California and Colorado, I didn't see that kind of overt racism. I was used to covert racism. And when I saw that, I said, there's got to be something that I've got to do. I didn't know what. Many times, even in the climate movement, we don't know what. We know we've got to do something. You don't have to have the answer, but you don't have to have the destination. You've at least got to get on the road. So I'm on the road right now.
Right.
I don't know what it's going to be at the end, but I do know something is not right.
Right.
I do know that in this movement today, it is a civil and a human rights issue, and we all deserve to be there. So to answer your question, the thing that sustains you is the belief factor that it can happen. I don't know how many people believe that we can turn this around, this critical point. We can turn it around if enough people believe.
Right.
And that's what it really starts. Because I've learned one thing. Everything starts with a thought. And your thoughts become your words. And your words become your behavior. Your behavior becomes your actions become your habits, and your habits become your destiny. And our destiny is to turn things around. But we can't get to our destiny if our thoughts are warped. So we got to change the thought process, and the thought process is that we're winning.
You also studied psychology, so there's a little bit of background in that.
I got there. I'm a licensed psychologist. I finished an undergraduate at Tennessee State, a master's from Illinois, a doctorate from the University of Massachusetts, and another master's from Howard University in Divinity. My first 3 are in psychology. And then I was vice president of 2 universities and all that. And while doing all of that, I pastored one of the largest Baptist churches in Atlanta for 25 years while I was dean at Morehouse School of Medicine. So with Lou Satcher and David Satcher and Lou Sullivan, I was then talking about the health. But see, it's one thing to talk about the climate and environment. It's another thing to create an environment where people can come together and break down their barriers. So we were fighting a twofold barrier, a twofold environment, the environment of the mind and the environment of the climate. And when they two come together, then we've got a chance to continue to win. But as a psychologist, as a pastor, as a person who now is trying to, I could go into the didactics of all of the kinds of issues there, but across town here in the global science, they know all of that.
Yeah.
All of the politicians know all of that. And I'm not above now saying, and you heard me say this morning, that now we've got to understand the legislative process. We've got to change the voting, but to vote for what? To vote that they do not take back all of the regulations that we put in the automobile industry, that we do not go back and drill in the ocean, that we do not cut back on the CO2 levels that we've set for 105 or 2 points Celsius. So the politics is very important because politicians make the laws. But guess who influences the politician? The business people. When they say Donald Trump's base are those people out there wearing those red hats, that's not Donald Trump's base. His base is Wall Street, business people, and they're doing all right. And the people that are around screaming after him, they're still going to hell in a wastebasket. So we've got to get to the business community and get to the political community to make an impact on lives. Can you imagine somebody saying, I want to change all the health care, and they don't have health care? That's a psychological deprivation of a person who has no hope. So we've got to, first of all, if the movement is to have, we've got to believe that's hope. And a hopeless people is a desperate people, and a desperate people leads to depression, and depression leads to personal suicide. And right now we're on a suicidal path unless we say we've got some hope to make a difference. So I'm using the psychological, the spiritual, as well as the business and the political side to try to engender some kind of enthusiasm about people to get up and do something.
Yeah. Now, when you talk like this, I feel like we're going to win this thing. I feel like you're
we're
getting
winning
it going.
now because the two of us are talking.
Exactly. How do we reach the guys in the red hats, as you put it?
Well, I think first of all, I've learned one thing, and they used to say, Durley, you're a great motivational speaker. I am not a motivational speaker. I tried for years to get my son, motivate him to pull up his pants. It didn't work. But what you can do, what I am, is an inspirational person. The word inspire simply means to breathe something in. So if we're to get those red people with the red hats, they've got to be inspired. They've got to be inspired. And how do you inspire them? To let them look at where they really are to make their own decision. See, you can't motivate, but you can inspire. And once you inspire, guess what? People will motivate themselves. And it's only when we become motivated, only when the red hats become motivated, they can be going broke, they can leave the coal mining industry and all of that, and they still will hold on to something that they think is coming. That the hope is through this, but that's beginning to fail now. Now, as it begins to fail, what do we give them? We talk about the economy in terms of alternative jobs, in terms of solar, wind. We talk about the healthcare kinds of issues. We talk about the educational platforms, things that are bread and butter issues to most Americans. So we bring it back to the reality. And I just believe, with all that I've seen, even during the most racist times that I saw in Mississippi and Alabama 58 years ago, there were some decent people, but they were misled, misplaced hate and ignorance and fear. So we alleviate that fear and that ignorance by saying, look, is this what you want for you and your children and your future generation? I believe at that point, that nexus point, we can start seeing a difference.
Can you think of an example of a time where an intervention like this was made, where there was someone who you knew had no hope, and you or someone you knew were able to infuse hope into this person, to help them turn around, to empower this person to move forward?
Well, I think that my example and my role model was when Martin Luther King, and I shared with it when he first started. This was a 26-year-old man that had finished Harvard University and went down to Alabama. He had 2 small children. He did not really want to get involved in all of this. He knew about it. He was concerned. But a group of older people in Montgomery had a meeting and formed the Montgomery Improvement Association and said, let's go get that young kid down there and bring him down here, because we don't want to lose our jobs. We don't want to fight the establishment. So that one person who started just speaking out and getting with Rosa Parks and starting a 365 bus boycott made a difference. And somebody else came, will you come over to my city? Will you come over to my city? And next thing, he was receiving the Nobel Peace Prize after 13 years. One person can make a difference. The same thing I could say with Gandhi or Desmond Tutu. These were individuals that are Nelson Mandela, what he had to give up. And if you're not willing to sacrifice and risk, nothing will happen. And I think that that's the key ingredients. That's the fuel in this car. What good is it for you to have a beautiful Rolls Royce and no engine? We are the engine people now to turn the economy, to turn the climate effort around. So the individuals like that, when I sit and talk to a mother who's lost 3 kids to drug and 1 murdered, and I have to talk about a system that has been unjust to her, and for me to come up and talk about climate change, that's the furthest thing for her mind. So I have to connect the dots between what's going on in the climate. When you take a people and keep them in a clustered ghetto with poor education, no jobs, and turn the heat up to 105 degrees over a 7-day period, you've got a volatile situation. So that's an environmental that affects the societal and the justice issues that are permeating these little enclaves. So we got to come from a point of jobs, of education, of health care. Then we can begin to to create the kind of massive element to touch the lives of the business people. And you can see, I am not above what we did. I am not above boycott. If they're going to keep the plastic going into the ocean that's killing our fish, if they're going to keep doing all of that that's killing the plankton on the corals down there in South Africa because they're being bleached now, then we've got to say, no, we will not put up with that. I went up to Washington a few weeks ago with a large group of mothers to talk about just the quality of air and GMOs, genetically modified organism. A man pulled me to the side in the Rayburn building and said, we will never label products here with GMO because they will not buy it in Europe. That means profits over people. We're not saying stop testing. We're saying at least label it so people can buy the product. People in urban areas, rural, they cannot afford organic food, so they've got to eat carrots that have never been in the ground and all of this. So we've got to now connect the dots for people that they say this is real. And the key thing, too, is that it is not real in the future. It is real now. See, as long as we can keep putting it off, we can no longer put this off. And I'm not an alarmist. I'm not crying fire in the auditorium. This is real.
Well, there is a fire, though. Yeah, it's
a fire. Yeah. But
how do we balance this? Because this is something a lot of communications consultants always say is we can't use fear. Whereas it sounds like what you're saying is we have to motivate by the fear because it's a real threat, we have to offer a solution.
No,
right?
I think first of all, I think that there's a difference in how you portray. Now, having been a pastor for many years, I could use fire and brimstone doesn't work anymore. I can get up and preach about going to hell all day and people go out and cuss each other out in the parking lot. So fear does not work, but it's how you couch the situations that are coming in on people that they themselves make the change. I'm convinced you can't convince or change anybody until they see. I tell them all the time, all I am when I speak to you, I'm a mirror. And a mirror allows you to reflect on who you are. If you've got a smudge on your face, you can look at it, and I'm the mirror, and you can say, I've got a smudge. I think I'll just leave it alone. Or I've got a smudge. I think I'll change it. Or I don't see the smudge. It's the mirror's problem. So you've got to create. Don't say be fearful about all the things. We saw that with the cigarette industry. People kept smoking, and they said, you're causing cancer. Okay, well, when should I stop? No, because they couldn't see it. Then they put a little thing by the Surgeon General on the side. People are still smoking. So that's the fear of that. Jails have not made people afraid of murder, all these kinds of atrocious crimes. So that fear doesn't work. But it's how you couch and what are the alternatives. And when people say, wait a minute, climate change is destroying my home, is destroying my life. Cancer is at an alarming rate in our neighborhood. Asthma. So those are realities. Those are not fearful, baseless charges. That's reality. And when people can see the reality and it's connected, then they'll ask the question, what can I do? Then we're ready. Then we've got to move.
Yeah. Once you get that little spark.
That spark. Okay, and that's all that a fire is. When you notice a fire, you've got a spark and you've got the kind of material to keep it flaming.
One group that you could probably comment on a bit is the whole faith-based community. They've been pretty slow to get into this. And the evangelicals.
Well, one of the reasons that evangelicals are somewhat reticent because you got to understand your major evangelical churches, their membership owns the companies, and if they want to keep their collection plate filled, they better keep the congregation happy. So
like which one? Which you want to get in specifics?
I don't want to name any specific. It's a generalization, you know. And I think that we have to be concerned, but again, in the Christian tradition, in the faith, so many times when we're preaching, we're very comfortable going to the book of Exodus, which is the second book in the Bible, and we take up the 10 commandments: thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not steal, and we get so caught up in all of the thou shalt nots in the second book. And when you stay on the second book, that's wrong. When you play baseball, you don't hit the ball and run to second base. You run to first base. First base in the climate change is Genesis, the first chapter where God says, I have given you a perfectly balanced ecological world where you'll have clean water and all of this, clean water and fresh air. You are the stewards. Take care of it. That's the first commandment. But we're more comfortable going to the 10 commandments, and we're so busy in the 10 commandments, we're missing the first commandment, and we're destroying a perfectly balanced earth. And now we're reaping the percussion from Sandy to Florence coming up now. So we've got to go back to that first commandment. How do we go back to one that created all of this and gave us what we have and say, take care of it? We said, no, I'm going to go over here and condemn you for cursing and gambling and drinking and chasing women. And we miss that we're destroying it. So now that we've destroyed so much of ourselves now, we're just continuing to destroy the earth. So I think that we've got to go back and allow people to convict themselves. I'm through convicting people. As I said earlier, no more doom and gloom for me. I'm on a winning team.
Yeah.
I want to be around winners. I want to be around.
But we
people
still
that can
don't we have to worry about the bad guys?
About anything. Worry
Koch,
me schizophrenic.
But what do we do about the Koch brothers?
Let me tell you what. I spoke out in Kansas. I didn't know the Koch brothers were from. My home is Wichita. I was born in Wichita, headquarters,
right.
And I was speaking at the University of Kansas, and I was just tearing up the Koch brothers in the air. And somebody raised the audience. Well, what are you going to do about the Koch brothers? I said, absolutely nothing. I'm more concerned about what we're going to do. If I spent all my time wondering about the Koch brothers, I would never get anywhere. All the money that they have. A man told me I'd never vote. He's dead. I'm voting. So consequently, if I worry about all of that, if I'm concerned about that, I wear myself out, and I can't say, come on, let's get together and do this. And you tell me we can't, the Koch brothers. Who are the Koch brothers? The coach used to tell me I understand the larger part, but and Ted Turner and I talk about this a lot. I never would have gotten into this, but I saw he's only 84 years old, but he's given his life to, and others have given their life. So I have to look, and I have to be honest with myself. Let me give an example. I was a hypocrite. When I first got into this, I always drove a Mercedes 550. Because I was poor all my life, and I said, when I finally get some money, I'm going to buy the best car they make. And so I got into the movement, and I'm going to meetings with people like Laura and all of them, and they were driving Priuses, and I would park my car 2 blocks so they wouldn't see that I was driving a gas guzzler. I was phony. See, we got to get away from fake news, because that's the only thing worse than fake news is fake people. And I was faking, so then I traded in. So now I drive a hybrid. I feel better because I had to make the choice, but I had to break through a lot of the personal and battles in my own mind. We've got to help people break through those. How important is this effort? How is what I do going to make a difference? Many people don't think one person can make a difference. And I used to preach about one person who did make a difference, but they hung him on the cross too. So what's wrong with hanging on the cross? Pretty good role model.
Yeah.
Because you will get up in 3 days. But you got to be willing to get up on the cross. You see, so if we can get into that point that we are at a critical nexus point in this whole journey, and we can inspire that. The word enthusiasm in Greek is entheos, in God.
Right.
Now, but it's an interesting thing. In God simply means in a belief. Atheists believe in something, and they would jump up and fight. So we've got to improve that. And how do you do it? By making people believe that we can.
Believe in something larger than yourself.
Larger than yourself, and that you are part of that.
We do get this sense that the election of Donald Trump in this country has sparked a lot of disenfranchised people or people who had not given up hope but become complacent to suddenly get involved.
Yes.
Are there specific organizations or movements within this whole resistance that you think are the most likely to help lead to change, or is it everybody?
No,
or is it
definitely. I think so. I've got a young brother. I call him kind of a younger brother named Al Sharpton, and he's got National Action Network. The NAACP has got a large platform. Sierra Club, I think, is doing a fantastic job. Interfaith Power and Light, we're in 40. I chair that board, and we're in 40 states, 28,000 houses of faith. When we founded World Pilgrims in Atlanta, Muslims, Christians, Jews, and Buddhists, we're talking about not only learning each other, the differences in our faith, but how do our faith speak the same language when we talk about earth, wind, and fire. The earth is the fullness of God, but the Muslims say it too, and the Jews say it.
The indigenous people say it too.
Indigenous people, certainly they do. And so consequently, there are groups, the NAACP, Sierra Club, and Nexus. It's an interesting phenomenon. You'd be interested in this. There's a young man, I won't name his name, but he believes that we need to impeach the president, and he's putting his resources to impeaching the president. I don't think we should impeach President Frankenstein. I think that he needs to stay there. Frankenstein said, I'm going to make a greater man, and he made a disaster. So I don't think that, because Pence is worse than Trump.
But he's religious too.
So was the Klan.
Yeah, good point.
Klan. Yeah. I used to, when I taught at Illinois, I used to read a prayer, a very religious prayer, and ask my students in a survey course who read that prayer, who said this prayer. It was a prayer that said, "Dear God, we thank you so much for all that you are doing, for helping us weed out all of the diseases in our neighborhood, for giving us clairvoyance that we might grab people and individuals and anything that would stop us from being who you called us to be." And I would ask the question, who prayed that prayer? The Jews would say it's a great rabbinical prayer. The Muslims say, oh, Allah is there.
And the Christians say, oh, that's Jesus. And that was a prayer that the Ku Klux Klan prayed every time they lynched somebody.
Wow.
They were deeply religious people with a conviction. So consequently, it's not about religion, but it's about a moral question that we've got to ask and that people have got to ask for themselves. And then we can start this effort sustain this effort.
You had talked earlier about a project that you're involved in Israel, and I think you just alluded to it a few minutes ago. I forget the name of it, where you were swapping. You had people.
Well, that was World Pilgrims, and we started with 12. Been 12 years ago, and we would go, Muslims, Christians, and Jews. When we go to Turkey, rabbis and Christian ministers, we would sit under the feet of Imam Pliman Al-Amin in the Blue Dome in Istanbul, and he would teach us from the Quran. And can you imagine Jewish rabbis looking toward the east? Or when we go to Antioch, the Rabbi Josh Lesser or Rabbi Sugarman or God Goodman would open up the Torah, the big scrolls, and read from the Torah. And it's interesting when you begin to compare what Allah and what Jehovah said. Then when they get to Ephesus, it's my turn to say what thus saith the Lord. And what we looked at, and it's all kind of verses that's talking about the fullness thereof, and God is in all of this. So then we change roommates every other night. Because before you were a Jew, before you were a Muslim, before I was a Christian, you were just a little baby. You didn't have that label on you. Yeah. You were a girl baby. Then you said, oh, I'm a girl baby. Oh, I'm a girl baby who's an African American. Oh, I'm a girl baby who's an African American, and I'm in a Christian home. Therefore, and you're that. So we try to strip away all that and say, we're just here. And you cry like I do. I hurt like you do. We go through the same thing. We might have different economic differences, but as human beings that God created in their own image of God, we've got to do. So that was the purpose of World Pilgrims. And so right now, we've got about 400 in the Alumni Association. And in that association, Chattanooga, they were getting ready to close a mosque in Chattanooga. We made one phone call and had 4 buses rolling over there and stood out in front of the mosque. Christians, Jews, and say, no, you will not run over us first.
Wow.
And then backed off. And the same thing with Interfaith Power and Life, wherever I am with our 40 states and all this, that it's not about black and white and your sexual differences, because climate change, global warming is an equal opportunity destroyer. So we've got to have some affirmative action steps on that to speak out if we're going to bring any change. But it starts with conviction and conversion. And I'm not trying to get religious, but you've got to be convicted before you can be converted. But before you can be convicted of converted, you've got to have a calling. And the calling comes from the message that comes from us, comes through us from a God that's saying, you all are still blowing it. When are you going to give me a break? When are you going to give me a break? And that's what we've got to do now.
I have to confess I'm not a particularly religious person anymore, if I ever was. But I found this guy really inspiring. And if Reverend Durley inspires you as much as he inspires me, I encourage you to pick up his book, I Am Amazed, which reads like he talks, fast and fun, and full of wisdom that catches you looking the other way. If you decide to buy it through Amazon.com, can I encourage you to access Amazon through my own website, bionic-planet.com? If you do that, I'll get a few pennies too. Unfortunately, there's no audiobook for I Am Amazed, but if you listen to audiobooks, you can support Bionic Planet by visiting audibletrial.com/Bionic Planet and signing up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com. The address again is audibletrial.com/Bionic Planet, and that's Bionic Planet with no dots, dashes, or spaces, as opposed to my website, which is bionic-planet.com. Finally, if you really like what you hear and you want to keep Bionic Planet going, you can support the show by becoming a patron at bionic-planet.com. You can help keep me afloat for as little as $1 per episode, either via bionic-planet.com or via patreon.com/Bionic Planet. Finally, be sure to give me a good 5-star review on whichever app you subscribe through, because the more reviews I get, the more ears I get. And the more ears I get, the more minds I can reach, and only by reaching hundreds of millions of minds will we fix this mess. We can do it if we all work together. Why don't we talk a little bit about your experiences abroad and how that may have informed your views, and then talk about the TV project?
Well, basically, I was deeply involved in the civil rights movement. I came back. I was there, ground crew at the March on Washington. That was my senior year in college, 1963. And we came back, and I was president of student government and leading in the Nashville movement there. And got back, and that was August the 28th. So September, we're organizing, getting people promoting them up. September, October. And then all of a sudden, a big disaster occurred. November 22nd, 1963, they killed John F. Kennedy. And when they killed Kennedy, I had to speak to the entire student body. Do we go on? Do we continue to fight here in Nashville? And we got stronger and stronger, but we became much more militant at that time. See, I wasn't a terrorist. I was a militant. And but then at my senior year, a man came into my room and said, "You're going to be in a lot of trouble. You need to leave the country. And my brother-in-law has started a program that you might be interested in." I said, "No, I don't want to see your brother-in-law. I'm through talking to everybody. We're going to do what we got to do as students here in Nashville." He said, "Well, think about it." And he asked me 3 questions. Who do you know that's important? Where have you been outside of the United States? And how much money do you have in your pocket? Well, as a college student, I didn't have much money. I'd never been outside of the United States, and I didn't know any senators, anybody. He said, "Then why don't you listen to me and think about my brother-in-law's program?" His brother-in-law was John Fitzgerald Kennedy. He started a program called the United States Peace Corp. I was in the first Peace Corps group to go to Nigeria, West Africa in '64, and got over there and spent 2 years really learning and really growing. So when I got ready to come back to America, I couldn't get in, so I had to move to Switzerland and live there. Ça, c'est la raison maintenant, je parle en français très bien. Pour ça, 12 ans, j'habite en Suisse.
Und Schweizerdeutsch auch? Oder
Ah,
just...
sprechen Sie nein.
Yeah, okay.
But la cabeza no buen teléfono en español. But anyway, so I had to come back to America, and that's when I enrolled in Illinois and became so angry I joined the Panther Party in Chicago in '68. And with the Black Panther Party.
My neck of the woods.
Yeah, I was right there off of Halstead Street.
Okay.
Yeah, and I went to Northern Illinois. I started a program there called CHANCE. Yeah, CHANCE stood for Complete Help and Assistance Necessary for College Education, recruiting students, because I was trying to channel that energy. And then, of course, I finished there and went on to the University of Massachusetts and then back to Howard University. But all those times I stayed in the street, and I think that keeps you grounded.
Yeah.
That keeps you grounded. And I think that that's what's going to be key, and that's what they were leading to today. I'm dealing with millennials now who don't worship anywhere, and the key to get millennials is find out where they are. Mm-hmm. See, I believe the best time is not a Sunday morning service, but a 5 o'clock Saturday when they've done all their work before they go party. Mm-hmm. Worship at 5 o'clock on Saturday, because on Sunday they party so hard on Saturday night they can't get up to come on Sunday. They're not going into this. Uh-huh. So consequently, find the time that's best for them.
Right,
so
right.
11 o'clock on Sunday morning is not a good time for most millennials. Mm-hmm. One, and they don't want to hear the same old traditional methods. They want to know, let me come in, let me hear what I can do, and how can I be sustained in what I've got to do. Mm-hmm. And then let me go on my way. Mm-hmm. The only inconvenience they might accept is parking. Mm-hmm. Right. But other than that, they don't want to hear somebody get up and talk all day long about appreciation dinners. Mm-hmm. So consequently, we've got to do that and change, and particularly in the African American community. I'm working with a lot of young pastors who are saying now you have an obligation, as I said earlier, a moral responsibility to not just paint a negative picture, but paint a picture of hope, because our people are becoming depressed, and depression is one step away from self-inflicted pain and death. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, African American women have been turning up in the polls lately, though. All of our hopes are on you guys.
Yeah. Well, Stacey Abrams is down there running against all over, know, and out here in California, Kamala Harris and all those. And I look back, and the women are doing. We did it down in Alabama when Roy Moore's election, and so it's very critical now. But before all of that, we've got to say you can do it. You heard me today. I guess you can win. We're winners. We're victorious. But if I say, oh, man, suppose I said, oh, this little radio cast, nobody's going to hear it. Nobody's going to do this. Pretty soon you'd say, well, maybe he's right, and we wouldn't be doing it. Mm-hmm. But it's going to touch some people. Somebody will hear it. It's like a farmer. They go out and plant seeds. They hope the rain will come, the sun will come. But if you don't plant seeds, it's guaranteed you'll get no crop. Yep. So I'm going to keep on planting seeds doing this because the harvest is coming. The harvest is coming, so I've got to keep planting. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what is so important. And until we infuse that in the climate movement, it's just going to be a bunch of dead, tired, weary, good people.
Yeah. No, I've been through. I've fallen asleep at many panel discussions.
Yeah. And they'll get they'll take notes and they'll record things. But if they look at it, they're recording what they recorded at the last conference.
Yeah, reruns. Yeah. You're gonna be taking a lot of this knowledge that you've acquired over the years and putting it into a television program now in Atlanta.
In fact, some people ask me, how are you enjoying retirement? I'm not retired. Let me give you the term I use. I'm rewired. I'm in retirement now. All the years that I've taken, all the jails that I went through, all of it, that was a part of my just going through until I got tired. Mm-hmm. And then some people, when they get tired, they say, well, we're going to retire you. I am rewired. So I'm pulling all of that together, and we're going to put together a show under AIB, Atlanta Interfaith Broadcasting in Atlanta. 12 30-minute shows called Dare to Care with Dr. Gerald Durley. And on that program, there'll be 2 sides to every story. And somewhere in there, we can find something that anybody can pick up in the smorgasbord of discussion that meets their need. So the Black Lives Matter people were talking about the veteran in the movement. Gentrification, which is occurring all over the country. Does that mean that because the tax base is bringing money into the cities, but many people cannot afford to move, where do they go? But other whites are coming in, taking those homes. Let's look at all of that, and let's hear from those that are losing their home, those that are buying their home. And so we need to look at gentrification. We got to look at the climate change issue when the city of Atlanta went from 7% to 28%, just asthmatic condition, and how are the hospitals joining in with that. So this program will look at that. So right now in retirement, I'm just taking all of those things. I'm just going to be kind of asking like you're doing now, asking the question and let it come forth. Because I found when I go to the Golden Corral or any of these banquet buffets, it's all out there. Now, what best meets my need? And if I can get enough people in that banquet hall, that buffet, picking up the right kind of food, we can make it. And that's why we're winning now. That might be my new thing. We're winning. And the more I say it, you start believing it. And the more you believe it, the more you can say it emphatically. I can go out here on this corner right now and look up in the sky and stand by a tall building and just stand there. Next thing you know, somebody will come along and they'll look up. And I'm just looking. They'll look up. And the next thing is about 10 of us looking up. And I can stop and I'll come to you and say, what are you looking at? He said, you don't see it? It's right up there. Because people, it's infectious when people believe in something. I don't sense that now. But with all of the data that we have, the Paris Accord, the bond treaties, all of the kinds of efforts that are going, and we're focusing on getting the EPA director out of office. Wheeler is worse than the one that was there before. Yeah. What was his name?
Pruitt.
Yeah. Pruitt was an animal when he came. He came out of the swamp, went to the swamp, and conducted the swamp with the swamp master. So consequently, we got to understand that we now have we're in a moral war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are.
Yeah. So I guess that's, and I get more and more excited every time I'm asked to say something. And this was a tough trip for me to come on this time, because my daughter-in-law is going through the last stages of cancer. She's there with my son in the hospital now. Mm-hmm. And so I started not to come. But as I said, it's a key word that all of us in the movement must understand. In the Greek, there are 2 words, chronos. The word chronos means that there are 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute, and we get the word chronological. We said we'd meet chronologically. But there's another word that I think is very pronounced, K-A-I-R-O-S, kairos. Kairos means that there are no minutes, no hours. It is divinely inspired by a force greater than us. This is a kairos moment. It wasn't planned. Mm-hmm. It came together at the right time, at the right purpose, for the right reason, with the right people. It would touch a right audience because it's kairos. We've got to come back and allow that kairos moment to come in our movement, where we're not trying to plan everything, but allow the intervention of an almighty sovereign God to make a difference. Because that's what it's about now. But we said, well, let's look at this, and we're going with the State Iron scores, and 32% of this, and 19% of that, and at the end, okay, and then somebody's going to try to out-statistic you.
Right,
and out-text you, and out-email you. We've got all of that. Let's just bring it back to the basics. We've got to protect human life, plant life, animal life, insect life, and how about a little human life? You see, that's what it's really about now. So and I'm coming up with a phrase now in the last part of my journey here on earth called alive. That's what I'm about, alive. Uh-huh. Alive stands for a life is valuable every day. I told a group the other day, I know now why the filmmakers come to Atlanta to film The Walking Dead, because that's all I see. Going into Safeway, the Kroger's, the public supermarket, Walking Dead. So we've got to come alive again. A life is valuable every day. And if you go on Amazon and look up a book called I Am Amazed.
Oh, that's your book. Okay.
It's my book. Everything. You'll see pictures in me with Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Jimmy Carter, Mother Teresa, all over the world, speaking in Israel. I'm Amazed by Gerald Durley. And everything I'm saying now, it's all, you'll see a picture when Coretta Scott King and Andy Young gave me this.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, this is the King Medallion for those that walk with Dr. King, 28 of them in the world. Nelson Mandela has number 19.
Wow.
I'm amazed right now to be able to sit here and talk to you. This was not in my program when I came here this morning.
Yeah.
See, children learn through amazement.
Yeah.
And we've got to have a childlike attitude governed by an almighty great God. And then we can see some things happen. And as Lennox said, the power of love. And one of the things that I try to say to people who are disconcerted, who are going, not as a psychologist, but as a human being, a spiritual person, is that in Philippians, the 4th chapter, verse 7, it says, God will guarantee you one thing. Now, a lot of people thinks God's going to guarantee them a pot over in Las Vegas. That's not what he guaranteed. He said, here's what I give you. I give you the peace that surpasses all understanding. And the peace that I give you will control two things in your life: how you think and how you feel. So at any moment in your life, if you're not feeling well, nor thinking well, you're not at peace. And if you're not at peace, you're rejecting a gift that God has already given you. So when the peace starts disrupting, say, God, give me back that peace. He said, you got it, just accept it. But most of us don't want to accept it because we got 3 degrees. You see, sometimes you got to cut through that and just go back to the basic. Go back to the make. And then once you get the strategy, 3 words I want to share with you. And that is, when we were organized and pulling together, 3 words: organize, strategize, and mobilize. Right now in the movement, we're still in the organizational phase. We got a lot of talking, but no real, and some strategies are solid. Self-driving cars, wind and solar. But the real, once you organize, once you strategize, now mobilize. And once the mobilization phase comes, that's what this whole summit is about, trying to mobilize people. And once they become mobilized, and they can make a difference. I remember we were marching in Skokie. All the newscasters stopped him and asked him, well, Dr. King, what about this and that? And he said something I've never forgotten. He said, wait a minute, I can't give you another interview. Watch this. He said, I've got to go catch my people. You only have a movement when the leader has to catch the people. You don't have a movement if the leader's got to be pulling you along.
Right.
But when you can inspire people that will go when you're not there, when you're sick, when you're stumbling, when you're in jail. And he said, I've got to go catch my people. And I've never forgot that. So I said, if I'm ever in a position, I want to be so that I can inspire people so that they'll move whether I'm there or not. And that's what we've got to do. We don't need, people always ask me, is there another Martin Luther King on the horizon? No. They come along once in a while. So, and I say, you are the essence of that. When Martin sat down with Mahatma Gandhi and they talked, he came back, he says, I found another way. And regardless of what happens to me, I've been to the mountaintop. And in his last speech, he said that. There, when we were all, Bernice King, his daughter, we were all in Memphis on the 50th anniversary of that. So that's what we've got to do now. Inspire individuals that they take ownership and make moral decisions about what we're facing right now. And there has to be, I don't know how to say it, it has to be, you've been people that, good people, knowledgeable people, smart people, wealthy people, but they give a lecture.
Yeah.
Now, but at a place where there's a rally, you got to say, wait a minute, this is a rally. I spoke on the 8th in Atlanta. I said, I didn't come here for that. I came here because this is a rally. And a rally means iron sharpens iron. So that's kind of my sentiment on this.
Is
this all making sense to you?
This makes a lot of sense. I was going to say, it's very motivational. I'm motivated to go and do do as many episodes as I can, my little steps. And I hope, when I hear you talk, I really believe it. I feel like we're gonna beat this thing and we're gonna get it.
And there is no accident that you happen to come up with me, that I happen to be here. I started to leave last night after I presented at the Grace Cathedral last night. Through Interfaith Power and Light, we presented to the United Nations Secretary a scroll with 80,000 signatures on it about things that she needed to do at the United Nations. And then I started to catch a midnight plane to go back. But in a Kairos moment, we're here now.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you stuck around.
Yeah.
This has been great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. That's the Reverend Dr. Gerald Durley closing out this episode of Bionic Planet. And if you stick around through the closing theme, you'll get a bonus. The full, unedited audio of the speech he gave in San Francisco that got me hooked on this guy. If you like what you hear on Bionic Planet, be sure to share the love by giving me a good rating on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, or wherever you access the show. You can also support me financially for as little as $1 per month by becoming a patron at bionic-planet.com. If enough of you do that, I can deliver more episodes and maybe better produced episodes to boot, with a second set of ears and better editing and pacing. And finally, if you listen to audiobooks, you can support me by visiting audibletrial.com/Bionic Planet for a free 30-day trial to audible.com. The address again is audibletrial.com. That's all one word, audibletrial.com/Bionic Planet. And that's Bionic Planet with no dots, dashes, or spaces, as opposed to my website, which is bionic-planet.com. That's all for today. Until next time, I'm Steve Zwick in Chicago. Thanks for listening. Still there? Good. Here's that bonus content I promised you.
Good morning. I am not the president nor the founder of Interfaith Power and Light, but the president is right there, Susan Hendershot of Interfaith Power and Light, which is an organization in about 40 states around the country and 2,800 faith organizations. Let me thank all of you for coming this morning and thinking it not robbery to talk about something that is extremely important to all of us, climate change. And today is a very special day. And you've assembled here this morning because I believe that you're compassionate, caring, committed persons who do not believe in something called fake news. Aaron Berger asked me earlier, what would you say this morning? What could you talk about in 8 minutes? I said it took a Baptist preacher 8 minutes to clear his throat, but I'll try to do it. So I came this morning just to share an idea. He asked me, what would you talk about? What would be an appropriate title for these distinguished people today? And I said, I have no idea. But this morning I woke up and I thought about a title. We are winning this war. I want to thank my good friends, Chip and Sally, who are here from our day, which inspired me for so many years. Many of you might have known that I joined the civil rights movement in 1960 with Dr. King. In those days, we thought that everybody had the constitutional and civil and human rights for a constitution to come together and demand our rights. At 18 years old, I was committed to making a difference. I had no idea when I walked onto the campus at Tennessee State University that I would be engrafted and surrounded by John Lewis and Andy Young, who are a few years older than myself. But it's interesting about movement. You never know when you're caught up in a Kairos moment where everything comes in around you, where you reach a point where you say, I cannot stand it any longer. As the young people say that enough is enough. Fannie Lou Hamer said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And most of you in this room today, you know about climate change. You've heard about wildfires. You've heard about fracking. You're fighting nuclear plants. You understand the whole concept of the gas house emissions. But every now and then we get dull. I told some people I'm not going to another conference, I'm not going to another march, I'm not going to another rally. I won't even come to a summit unless I see some excitement among you, the co-warriors who are here today. You are the warriors. You are the fighters. What good? If we've got a cause, if our cause is just, and I know that it is, we've got to go back to what made us strong during the civil rights movement. What made us strong were two key words. One word was we were willing to sacrifice. The other was take a risk. Nowadays, people don't want to sacrifice anything. I'm convinced that we need to drain the swamp, starting with the swamp master at 1600 Pennsylvania, if we're to bring a change. But too many times we get caught up in what we're not and should be doing. Dr. Martin Luther King was a scholar. He was a preacher. He was a prophet. And it's interesting about life So many things in life, you don't know when the mantle will be placed upon you. I think back now in Montgomery, Alabama, a young preacher, 26 years old, came down to Montgomery, and a group met, very much like people in the movement, the climate change movement today. And they said, we've got to make a difference. We've got to make a change here in Alabama. Martin Luther King, sitting with 2 small children, said, I'm 26 years old. I have nothing to contribute to that. And they had a meeting called the MIA, the Montgomery Improvement Association. And they said, why don't we get that young boy who just moved to town? Let him lead the movement. He said, that's not my issue. But they brought him in, and the rest is history. He led a march, a boycott. You never know when the mantle for you to take over, when the mantle for you to sustain yourself with all the events that are occurring around you. You might not know when, you might not know how, but you know where you must go now. Now is your time to make a difference. And I think now that you have an internal moral gyroscope, we are not in a political battle. We're fighting economic struggles, but this is a moral war that we're in today. Immoral decisions are being made. It's one thing to talk about, let's get rid of this person or get rid of that person. But it's a moral war that we're in when immoral decisions are being made. And if the climate change, global warming, environmental justice movement is to have any merit, there are those of us who understand that this is a kairos moment where you're not having the mantle placed upon you, but you've got to assume the mantle to move ahead. You don't know who will be watching you, who you will say. All of you warriors who came here, you should not come to just another conference, just another seminar, not just another workshop, but there will be something down inside of you that said, it is my responsibility. I have a moral obligation to make a difference when I leave here. All of you know more about climate change, more about fracking, know about nuclear power, know more about conditions than I. But I do not one thing. If I'm excited about something, I'm going to get enthused and I'm going to take somebody with me. We've got to vote like our lives depended on it. When you leave here, you ought to reach over and hold somebody's hand and say, guess what? I was at the Global Climate Summit. Don't show them your picture, show them your actions. Let them hear your words. Register to vote. Make a difference in what we're doing. We are warriors and we're gathered at this spot for a special reason, and that reason is to make a difference. Do as we did in the civil rights movement. We eradicated misplaced ignorance. We annihilated fear. We bond together and speak as one small voice. Chip, I have decided now in my life, I'm through reporting about negative climate change issues. 20,000 died in this country, flooding in this place, wildfires in California. I can't take any more doom and gloom. I need some victory stories. I need to hear about solar. I need to hear about wind. I need to hear about alternative energy. I need to hear that we are winning this war, that we're not just some group sitting around in an academic setting discussing it. I don't need breaking news to tell me what's going on. I don't need another white paper, and I don't need scientists. I see and smell what's going on in the environment. And that ought to propel us to do much more. This is our time. Climate change is real. We've got to claim the victories. You will hear panelists in a few moments. You'll hear speakers. You'll hear people talking, business people, politicians. But it starts with one. I never thought that I would be standing before this distinguished body. Not me, a kid who went to Tennessee from Colorado in 1960, 58 years ago, fighting for the civil rights. And I'll never forget when I walked up at 18 years old in front of some steps, just like many of you stand in front of steps and protesting. And a man stuck his finger in my face and said, come here, boy, let me tell you something. This is my country. You'll never, ever. We run City Hall. We run state government. We run the Congress. And we own the White House. And you think you're going to get the right to vote? You're sadly mistaken. You need to go back to Africa. I'm so glad that he told me where I should go. He's dead and I'm voting. Every now and then, you've got to know that just because they are deniers, just because they say that we will never stand up, it only takes 2 or 3 who are committed and who are concerned to make a difference. Fannie Lou Hamer said it best. In 1960, I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I understood I had to sacrifice and risk. I never thought that I would be in a climate change movement. I never thought when a lady came up to me several years ago, Sally and Susan, I'm there fighting civil rights, police brutality. And this lady said, I want to change teenage pregnancy here in the state of Georgia. And I looked at her and I said, why? She said, I must change it. And I looked at her and said, this seems not to be your battle, because she was a white woman. Why are you concerned about black young girls? She said, I'm concerned, but there's a group that's attacking me. I said, I'll go with you to talk to that group. And when I went to the group, and excuse me if I'm insulting anybody, it was a far right-wing evangelical group, and they condemned her. And when I saw them condemning her, a moment can change your life. I got up and I tore into them. I let them have it. Her name was Jane Fonda. She was married to a man named Ted Turner. They introduced me to this thing called climate change. I could have cared less about polar bears and trees, but there is something inside in a moment that says we must make a difference. And it's our time right now. If not you, then who? And it gives us the victory. You in this room, I don't come here to try to inspire nor motivate. You can't motivate anybody. They have to motivate themselves. And what motivates you is the devastation that we see. Every time I go into an urban area and I see the asthmatic rates going up, when I see the devastation all around the world, I'm convinced that the warriors in this room, that we're co-warriors, that we cannot back up, we cannot bend, we cannot break, we cannot bow down, that we've got to stand firm, that we've got to know. You will hear from speakers later on. Most of you can quote all the statistics, but what makes it happen is that the belief in it. What good is a prayer unless you believe in the prayer? That's what's powerful. Some people say, well, Durley, you're so excited. You've got to be excited when you know that you're winning. How do you know that you're winning? Because there's so many people here at the summit. There are people all over from different organizations saying, we can because we must. This is our time. This is our moment. This is your moment. What do you decide to do with your time? What do you decide to do with this moment? I'm convinced now that you are the warriors. You are the victors. You are the winners. And guess what? You in this room, we make the real news. When the news comes out, nobody can doubt us. We cannot ever again say that we're not winners. The civil rights movement taught me one thing. I never thought, I'm 77 years old now, a great-grandfather, and I talk to my grandchildren, I say, this is your time. Join in. We cannot break down and build silos, black and white and gay and lesbian and red and blue. We're all on this planet together, and environmental climate change is an equal opportunity destroyer. To me, it is the civil rights issue of our time. And if our time is to have any kind of sustainability, it's got to come from those in this room. It can't be the person next to you. We've got to join forces, hold hands, look up. And I think about this now. The God that created this universe is still in charge. And if we can understand and connect to something that's in charge, guess what? We will win this war. Thank you very much. Don't give up. Don't back up. Don't quit. Don't turn around. Know that this is get excited about something. Don't just say this is another conference, this is another summit. Every now and then you ought to want to stand up and say, we will not be defeated. We will not bow down. We will not back up. This is our moment. This is our time. Don't take it for granted. Don't take this for granted. We are winning. We are not losers. God bless you. Did I do it in 8 minutes?